Welcome, dear friends, to a tale of love, suspicion, and unexpected surprises. Enjoy the story. Sarah Matthews lay awake, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting shadows across the room. Her eyes traced the familiar contours of her husband Mark's face, peaceful in sleep. Once, that sight had filled her with warmth and contentment. Now it only fueled the gnawing doubt in her stomach. When had things changed? Sarah wondered, her mind drifting back to the early days of their marriage. They'd been so in love, so connected. Now it felt like Mark was slipping away, spending more and more time away from home on mysterious errands. Sarah's gaze fell on Mark's bare back, exposed where the sheet had slipped down. Her breath caught in her throat as she noticed angry red scratch marks marring his skin. Scratch marks that definitely hadn't been there the night before. "Oh, God," Sarah whispered, her heart pounding. Was this the proof she'd been afraid to find? Was Mark really cheating on her? As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, Sarah slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Mark. She couldn't face him, not with these thoughts swirling in her head. She needed time to think, to figure out what to do next. In the kitchen, Sarah went through the motions of making coffee, her mind a jumble of memories and suspicions. She remembered the day they'd moved into this house, how excited they'd been to start their life together. Mark's mother, Linda, had been so supportive, even moving to a place in the countryside to give them space as newlyweds. Linda. The thought of her mother-in-law brought a pang of guilt. Sarah hadn't visited her in months, always making excuses about work or allergies. Linda's passion for exotic plants had turned her home into a veritable jungle, triggering Sarah's allergies something fierce. But now, Sarah wondered if there was more to her avoidance than just pollen. Had she sensed on some level that something was wrong in her marriage? Had she been unconsciously pulling away, protecting herself from the truth? The coffee maker beeped, startling Sarah out of her reverie. She glanced at the clock, realizing she'd been lost in thought for nearly an hour. Quickly, she scribbled a note for Mark. "Early meeting, didn't want to wake you, have a good day," and rushed out the door. As she drove to work, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Should she confront Mark? Hire a private investigator? Or was she jumping to conclusions based on a few scratch marks and her own insecurities? One thing was certain. She couldn't keep this to herself any longer. She needed to talk to someone, and she knew exactly who that someone would be. The bustling corridors of St. Mary's Hospital usually energized Sarah, but today they only added to her sense of disorientation. As she made her rounds, checking on patients and updating charts, she found herself making careless mistakes, entering the wrong dosage here, mixing up patient names there. "Earth to Sarah!" A familiar voice cut through her fog. "Where's your head at today, girl?" Sarah looked up to see her best friend and fellow nurse, Emma Rodriguez, eyeing her with concern. Emma's warm brown eyes and no-nonsense attitude had been Sarah's anchor through many a crisis, personal and professional. "Sorry, Em," Sarah sighed, rubbing her temples. "I've just got a lot on my mind." Emma's eyebrows shot up. "Uh-oh. I know that look. Break room now. Spill." Moments later, ensconced in the relative privacy of the hospital break room, Sarah poured out her fears and suspicions. Emma listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each word. "Scratch marks?" Emma echoed when Sarah finished. "Girl, that does sound suspicious. But are you sure there's not some innocent explanation?" Sarah shook her head miserably. "I've been racking my brain, but I can't think of anything. And it's not just that. He's been so distant lately, always running off on mysterious errands. I feel like I'm losing him, Em." Emma's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Okay, here's what we're gonna do. You need to play detective, Sarah. Take a couple days off work, but don't tell Mark. Follow him, see where he goes, who he meets. If he is cheating, you'll catch him red-handed." Sarah bit her lip, torn between her desperate need to know the truth and her fear of what she might discover. "I don't know, Em. Isn't that a bit extreme?" Emma reached across the table, squeezing Sarah's hand. "Honey, your peace of mind is at stake here. You can't go on like this, imagining the worst. You need to know, one way or the other." As Sarah nodded slowly, agreeing to Emma's plan, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping onto a path that would change her life forever. For better or worse, she was about to uncover the truth about her marriage. The next 2 days were a blur of tension and hypervigilance for Sarah. She called in sick to work, citing a nasty stomach bug, and set about observing Mark's every move. She noted the times he left for work and returned home, cataloged every phone call and text message, and scrutinized his expressions for any hint of guilt or deceit. On the second night, Sarah's suspicions reached a fever pitch when Mark emerged from the shower wearing a t-shirt to bed, something he never did. Was he hiding more scratch marks, or worse, love bites from another woman? Sarah lay awake long after Mark had fallen asleep, her mind conjuring increasingly vivid scenarios of betrayal. By the time dawn broke, she had worked herself into a state of near panic. She knew that today was the day. She had to follow Mark, had to know the truth once and for all. As Mark kissed her goodbye, heading off to what he claimed was an early meeting, Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. Was this the last time he'd kiss her like this, with easy affection? Or had that kiss already happened, weeks or months ago, without her even realizing it? Giving Mark a 10-minute head start, Sarah grabbed her keys and slipped out of the house. Her heart pounded as she tailed his car through the morning traffic, careful to keep a few vehicles between them to avoid detection. To her surprise, Mark pulled into the parking lot of a large shopping mall. Sarah frowned, confused. What kind of meeting was he having at the mall? Was this where he was meeting his mistress? Sarah's hands shook as she parked her car and hurried into the mall. She caught a glimpse of Mark's retreating back as he rounded a corner, and she quickened her pace to keep up. But the morning crowd was thick, and within moments, she had lost sight of him completely. Panic rose in Sarah's throat as she darted from store to store, searching frantically for any sign of her husband. Had he spotted her and given her the slip, or had he ducked into some hidden rendezvous point with his lover? After an hour of fruitless searching, Sarah stumbled back to her car, tears streaming down her face. She collapsed into the driver's seat, sobs racking her body. She had failed. She still had no proof, no answers, only more questions and a heart full of pain. As she sat there, lost in her misery, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Any news? Did you find anything?" Sarah stared at the message, a sudden, wild idea taking root in her mind. There was one place she hadn't checked, one person who might have answers. Without allowing herself to second-guess, Sarah started her car and pointed it towards the countryside. It was time to pay her mother-in-law a long-overdue visit. The winding country roads seemed to mock Sarah as she sped towards Linda's house, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Each turn brought a new wave of anxiety and determination. She rehearsed confrontations in her head, imagining scenarios ranging from tearful confessions to righteous anger. As Linda's charming Victorian farmhouse came into view, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There, parked in the driveway, was Mark's car, and on the wraparound porch, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation, were Linda and Emma? Sarah's mind reeled. Emma? Her best friend? Her confidant? The very person who had encouraged her to follow Mark in the first place? A red haze of betrayal clouded Sarah's vision as she slammed on the brakes, sending gravel flying as she skidded to a stop. She was out of the car in an instant, storming towards the porch with fury in every step. Linda and Emma's heads snapped up at her approach, their eyes widening in shock and... Was that guilt? "Sarah!" Linda exclaimed, her face paling. "What are you doing here?" "I think the better question," Sarah snarled, her voice shaking with rage, "is what are you doing here, Emma, with my mother-in-law and my husband's car?" Emma held up her hands placatingly. "Sarah, honey, this isn't what it looks like. We can explain everything." "Oh, I bet you can," Sarah spat. "How long has this been going on, huh? How long have you all been laughing behind my back?" Linda stepped forward, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. "Sarah, dear, please calm down. You've got it all wrong. Mark is—" "Don't you dare say his name!" Sarah shouted, tears now streaming down her face. "I trusted you, Linda. I thought you loved me like a daughter. And you, Emma, my best friend. How could you do this to me?" Just as Sarah's tirade reached its peak, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Sarah? What the hell is going on? Sarah whirled around to see Mark emerging from the back of the house, his clothes covered in sawdust, a look of utter bewilderment on his face. The sight of him, disheveled and clearly caught off guard, punctured Sarah's balloon of rage, leaving her deflated and confused. "Mark," she whispered, her anger giving way to uncertainty. I don't understand." Mark crossed the yard in quick strides, reaching for Sarah's hands. She flinched away instinctively, and hurt flashed across his face. "Sarah, baby, what's wrong? Why are you here? I thought you were at work." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Work? That's rich coming from you. I know you've been lying to me, Mark. The late nights, the secretive behavior, and now I find you here? With Emma of all people?" Understanding dawned in Mark's eyes, followed quickly by a mix of guilt and amusement. "Oh, Sarah," he sighed. "Is that what you've been thinking? That I'm having an affair?" Sarah faltered, thrown by his reaction. Aren't you?" Mark shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Come with me. There's something I need to show you." Bewildered, Sarah allowed Mark to lead her around to the back of the house. As they rounded the corner, she gasped. There, gleaming in the afternoon sun, stood a beautiful greenhouse. Its glass panels sparkled, and even from a distance, Sarah could see the riot of colorful plants within. "What is this?" she breathed, her anger forgotten in the face of this unexpected sight. Mark squeezed her hand gently. "This, my love, is why I've been so secretive lately. It's a surprise I've been working on for months, for you and for Mom." Linda stepped forward, her eyes misty. "We know how much you love visiting, Sarah, but how hard it is with your allergies. So Mark came up with this idea, a greenhouse where I can keep all my plants, leaving the main house allergy-free for you." But Emma?" Sarah turned to her friend, confusion still evident in her voice. Emma smiled sheepishly. "I've been helping coordinate everything, honey. Making sure you didn't suspect, covering for Mark at times. I hated lying to you, but we all wanted this to be a perfect surprise." Sarah's knees felt weak as the truth sank in. All her fears, all her suspicions, they had been so terribly, wonderfully wrong. She looked at Mark, seeing now the love and concern in his eyes that she had been too blinded by fear to notice before. "The scratch marks," she said softly. "On your back. I saw them and thought—" Mark's eyes widened in understanding. "From the rose bushes. I was pruning them for the greenhouse and got a bit scraped up. Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant to make you doubt us." Unable to hold back any longer, Sarah threw herself into Mark's arms, sobbing with relief and lingering shame. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry I doubted you." As Mark held her close, murmuring words of love and forgiveness, Sarah felt the knot of fear and suspicion that had been growing in her heart for weeks finally begin to unravel. She had nearly destroyed her marriage with her own insecurities and jumped to conclusions. But here, surrounded by the love of her family, both blood and chosen, she knew that they would be okay. More than okay, in fact. They would be stronger for having weathered this storm together. 3 months later. The backyard of Linda's countryside home was transformed. Strings of twinkling lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm glow over the gathered friends and family. The sweet scent of barbecue mingled with the fragrance of summer blooms, creating an intoxicating atmosphere of joy and celebration. Sarah stood on the back porch, watching as Mark flipped burgers on the grill, laughing at some joke told by his college buddies. Her heart swelled with love and gratitude as she thought about how close she had come to losing all of this. "Penny for your thoughts." Linda's voice broke through Sarah's reverie. Her mother-in-law handed her a glass of lemonade, her eyes twinkling with knowing amusement. Sarah smiled, taking a sip of the cool drink. "Just thinking about how lucky I am, how different things could have been if I'd let my fears get the best of me." Linda squeezed Sarah's shoulder affectionately. "The important thing is that you didn't. You faced those fears head on, even if it didn't go quite as you expected." They shared a chuckle at the memory of Sarah's dramatic confrontation. In the months since, it had become something of a family joke, the day Sarah thought she was starring in her own soap opera. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Linda," Sarah said softly. Without any of you. You've all been so understanding, so forgiving. Linda's eyes misted over slightly. Oh, my dear, that's what family does. We love each other through the good times and the bad. Speaking of which, she glanced pointedly at Sarah's stomach, where the barest hint of a bump was just beginning to show. Have you told Mark yet? Sarah's hand flew to her abdomen, a secret smile playing on her lips. Not yet. I'm waiting for the right moment. I was thinking maybe tonight, actually. It is my birthday party, after all. What better gift could there be? As if on cue, Mark's voice rang out across the yard. All right, everyone. Burgers are ready. Let's gather round and raise a toast to the birthday girl. Sarah made her way down to the yard, accepting hugs and well wishes from friends and family. As Mark handed her a plate piled high with her favorite foods, she felt a surge of love so strong it nearly took her breath away. Happy birthday, beautiful, Mark murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. I love you more than words can say. Sarah leaned into his embrace, reveling in the solid warmth of him. I love you too, more than you know. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Actually, there's something I need to tell you. Something wonderful. Mark's eyebrows rose in curiosity. Oh, what's that? Sarah took his hand, guiding it to rest on her stomach. Mark, I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby. For a moment, Mark stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock. Then a grin of pure joy spread across his face. He let out a whoop of delight, lifting Sarah off her feet and spinning her around. A baby! He laughed, tears glistening in his eyes. We're having a baby? Oh, Sarah, this is amazing. Their commotion drew the attention of the other guests. Soon the backyard was filled with cheers and congratulations as the news spread. Emma rushed over, enveloping Sarah in a fierce hug. I knew it, she exclaimed. I had a feeling. Oh, Sarah, I'm so happy for you both. As the celebration kicked into high gear, fueled by the double joy of Sarah's birthday and the pregnancy announcement, Sarah found herself overwhelmed by the love surrounding her. She watched as Linda fussed over Mark, peppering him with questions about nursery plans and doctor's appointments. Emma was already on her phone, no doubt researching the latest in baby gear and prenatal vitamins. In the midst of the joyful chaos, Sarah slipped away to the greenhouse. She needed a moment to catch her breath, to process the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. As she stepped into the fragrant oasis, she marveled once again at the thoughtfulness of her husband and family. The greenhouse was a symphony of color and life. Exotic orchids bloomed alongside hardy succulents, while climbing vines created a lush canopy overhead. And there, in pride of place, was a small lemon tree, a wedding gift from Linda that Sarah had never been able to keep in the house due to her allergies. There you are, Mark's voice came from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. I wondered where you'd disappeared to. Sarah leaned back into his embrace, sighing contentedly. Just needed a minute. It's a lot to take in, you know? In a good way, but still. Mark nodded, understanding without her having to explain further. I know. It's crazy to think how much has changed in just a few months, how close we came to... He trailed off, but Sarah knew what he meant. How close they had come to losing everything. She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. I'm so sorry, Mark, for doubting you, for not trusting in us. Mark shook his head, cupping her face gently. Hey, none of that. We've been over this. Yes, you jumped to conclusions, but I wasn't exactly being open with you either. We both made mistakes. What matters is that we got through it together. Sarah nodded, blinking back tears. I love you so much. And now with the baby, I want to do everything right. Mark chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Oh, honey, we're going to make plenty of mistakes as parents, I'm sure. But as long as we face them together, I know we'll be okay. A comfortable silence fell between them as they stood there, surrounded by the fruits of Mark's labor and love. Sarah's mind drifted to the future, to a nursery filled with laughter, family dinners in this very greenhouse, weekends spent watching their child explore Linda's expansive gardens. What are you thinking about? Mark asked softly, noticing the faraway look in her eyes. Sarah smiled, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. I was just imagining our little one running around here. learning about plants from Linda, helping you in the workshop, baking cookies with Emma. Mark's eyes lit up at the vision. Don't forget story time with Dad and lullabies with Mom. This kid is going to be so loved, Sarah. So incredibly loved. As if on cue, Linda's voice floated in from outside. Sarah? Mark? Where are you two lovebirds? It's time for cake. They shared a laugh, the moment of quiet reflection broken, but not forgotten. As they made their way back to the party, hand in hand, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, sleepless nights, diaper changes, the terrible twos and beyond, she knew they would face them as a team. The backyard was a flurry of activity when they emerged from the greenhouse. Emma was directing traffic, making sure everyone had a good view as Linda wheeled out an enormous cake adorned with sparklers and an impressive array of candles. Make a wish, birthday girl, Emma called out as Sarah approached the cake. Sarah closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and blew out the candles in one mighty gust. As her friends and family cheered, she felt Mark's arm slip around her waist. So, he murmured in her ear, what did you wish for? Sarah turned to him, her eyes shining with love and hope for the future. Nothing, she said simply. I already have everything I could ever want right here. As the party continued late into the night, filled with laughter, love, and the occasional gentle ribbing about Sarah's soap opera moment, she found herself overcome with gratitude. For her husband, who had gone to such lengths to make her comfortable and happy. For Linda, whose love and forgiveness knew no bounds. For Emma, whose friendship had weathered even the stormiest of misunderstandings. And for the tiny life growing inside her, a symbol of new beginnings and endless possibilities.